On this week's edition of Mastodon Spotlight, we turn our attention away from the basketball court and instead we move it over to the diamond. Our guest this week will be head women's softball coach Keith Fisher, hopefully head men's baseball coach Billy Gurnan, and we'll talk softball and baseball. Our show is called Mastodon Spotlight, and it's coming up next. Hi again, everybody. I'm Mike Maas. Welcome once again to Mastodon Spotlight. Well, as I said a moment ago, we're going to turn our attention away from the basketball court. Women's basketball team is finishing their season this week at IUPUI. The men's team is on the road as well. They're playing Chicago State this week and also Youngstown State on Saturday. So while the basketball teams are away, we're going to talk softball and baseball. And in the first half of our program, we are pleased to be rejoined by the head women's softball coach here at IPFW, Keith Fisher. And Coach, welcome back.
Thanks, Mike.
Softball, IPFW. This is year number 3 for you at the helm. And I want to briefly review the progress that's been made in the Keith Fisher era. When you came to IPFW in 2000, you inherited a program, Division II program, and you made some strides. 2000 record 14-36. Numbers are misleading, as we're going to get into in a moment.
Sure.
But 14-36 in 2000. Last year, the transitional year into Division I, 7-33. But as I said, sometimes numbers are misleading. Let's briefly talk about those two teams first, and then we'll get into this year's team.
Well, first of all, our first season, we were in Division II program, and we actually won more ball games than actually this university has ever had. Not because of me, not because of my coaching staff, which I have an excellent coaching staff, but just because of the attitudes and the change of some of the kids' way of thinking. And we were super proud of that team. Then we jumped from Division II to Division I, played a lot of Division I teams, and found out that we can compete on certain levels. We couldn't compete on the Big Ten level at that point, but we are working hard, and this year we'll see what happens.
Let's talk a little bit about this year's team. And the first thing that I mentioned before we started taping that I wanted to bring up was the fact of the stability of the coaching staff. This is not only your third year here as the head coach, but your assistants Dennis Smith and Jennifer Long are also in their third year on the staff. Talk about those two coaches and what it means to have stability on the staff, not only from a coaching standpoint, but perhaps from a player standpoint.
Well, Mike, and I'm very, very proud to have these two people, plus I'll mention another person that's helping us as a volunteer coach at this time. But when I came into the program, we had one senior girl. In 4 years, she had 5 coaches. And, you know, it's pretty tough to have any transition as far as keeping the team together or knowing what each coach expects out of you. So we have been around for 3 years so far, and hopefully we'll be around for a long time coming. But Dennis Smith, a super individual. He's my pitching coach. He was a men's fast pitch pitcher. He's not very big. He's small, but that shows some of the gals that you don't have to be real big and strong to, as far as upper body, to be a softball pitcher, but you do have to use all parts of your body in order to be efficient, and especially in a Division I program. So I'm so pleased to have him with me, and he plans to continue on to stay. Jennifer Long was a student here at IPFW, graduated, played softball. She's the mother of the team, sorta. It's nice to have a woman with our program, and she takes care of most of the outfielders, and she just does a lot of work for us, and I'm very happy to have her. Our volunteer individual who actually was the first softball coach here at the university back in 1975 is Doc Skelton. We call him Doc. The girls know him quite well. He's actually a teacher here and also an administrator. And I asked Doc, I said, is there any chance that you want to come and help us after you retire? And he said, well, let me think about that. And so he likes to get up early in the morning because we practice from 6 to 8 in the morning, and he's been there every day starting in January, and he's done a good job for us. Matter of fact, his wife came up and gave me a big hug and said thank you, and I didn't know what she was thanking me for, and she says thank you for getting me out of the house. So we're happy to have Doc, and I'm happy to have all the assistant coaches.
Well, Doc is no stranger to those who watch College 56 Sports because he has pinch hit this year. He worked with me back in 1995-96 doing women's college basketball, and he helped us out this year for both a couple of women's games and a men's game that we had. So Doc is a very good man, and I'm sure that you two will be trading stories up the wazoo as the season goes on. But the stability part, and as you mentioned when you came along, it's got to be difficult for a student athlete to have to play for so many different coaches.
Yeah, sure, it is. And that's one of the things when I recruit new athletes and new student athletes is that their parents ask, are you going to be here through the 4 years that my daughter is going to be, an athlete and a student here? And that's a guarantee that I give the girls and give their parents. And as long as the university wants me, I'll be here, and I'm trying to build a program. And you can't build a program overnight. I'd love to. I'd love to come in our first year and have a winning record, and it'd be super. But it'd be because of the girls that we have, and we do have super young ladies, but we're working to improve that throughout the Division I program.
Well, let's talk about this 2002 roster for IPFW women's softball, and I guess we're going to go from the upperclassmen on down. When I look at the roster, I'm looking at 3 seniors, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shelly Freilich, Sonia Atienzo.
Sonia Atienzo.
And
took me 3 years to figure that out also, Mike.
Let's see, Nicole Stoppenhagen.
Yeah, Nikki Stoppenhagen.
And let's start with those 3 gals first.
Actually, Sonia's been with us, this is her 4th year. She was a softball player down at Adams Central. Very aggressive, fine young lady, a very good student, and she's been our third baseman. We put her in different places, and hopefully we're going to plug her right in at third base this year. Very hard-nosed player and a very hard worker, and so we're pleased to have her. Shelly Freilich is, we call her Little Bit. She's not very big, but she plays big, and we've had her all over the field, outfield, infield, catcher. She even played first base, and she's not big enough to hardly pick up the base, but she can do that. But a fine young lady, a fine student. I believe her degree is going to be in education, and someday she wants to be a coach, and I think she'll be a fine coach. She'll be small, but she'll be mighty. Nikki Stoppenhagen came to us by the way of St. Francis. She played for us last year, and she's playing for us this year. And she played infield for us, and she'll probably do that this year, or utility of some sort. But we're happy to have her, another fine young lady, and somebody that's going to help us this year.
The junior class is represented. Lori Farote from Snyder, we've had on this program before. I'm also Mandy Jaffe out of Indianapolis, Christo Fisher from Cedar Lake, and Stephanie Roth from Leo High School. Talk about the juniors.
Well, juniors, you take Lori Farote. Lori Farote, I think, has been a 4.0 student ever since she's been here at IPFW. A fine young lady. She's our captain of our team. She's a very hard worker, and when practice is over, a lot of times she'll be back later on in the day and doing in the weight room, and so she works very, very hard, and we're happy to have her. Crystal Fisher, a super catcher, can play anywhere also, a great hitter. Freshman year, she was the all-conference freshman as far as a catcher. She had a little misfortune this fall. She hurt her ACL, blew her ACL out. She went through the surgery and rehab, and she's coming back. She's not back yet 100%, but we're still going to look for things in this season with her somewhere, somehow, some form. Stephanie Roth, here's a young lady, came from Leo High School. She does some pitching for us. She'll play anywhere for us. This young lady has one of the finest attitudes of any girl that I've ever coached, and not that the other ones don't, but she's always got that smile on her face and a great work ethic. And our Manda Jaffe is our team spokesman. Let's put it this way, she's a communication major. She's a great young lady. She loves to talk, and there'll be a place for her, and she's a very good hitter, and we're going to work her in the lineup somehow, and she'll help us.
Well, we've got some other sophomores and freshmen to talk about, but we're going to take a momentary break. And then when we do come back, we'll go over the rest of the roster, and we'll talk about the upcoming schedule, because there's a lot of quality teams that are going to be playing IPFW in softball. But that and more when Mastodon Spotlight returns in just a moment.
A Stargate. That's the door to other worlds that my character Tilk and the rest of my team use on Stargate SG-1. It's a door to exploration and exciting adventure. And education can provide you with a similar passageway to a world full of possibilities. So stay in school and graduate.
Was in another lifetime, one of toil and blood. When blackness was a virtue, the road was.
If we do not take responsibility for saving animals from extinction, we allow a part of ourselves to die with them. Help World Wildlife Fund protect animals in the places where they live by ordering a free action kit. Together, we can leave our children a living planet.
Come in, she said, I'll give ya shelter from the storm.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. Our discussion this week, the early part of the program, is on women's softball here at the university. Our guest is Keith Fisher, the head women's softball coach at IPFW. And Keith, we're going over the roster, and we went with the seniors and the juniors. We've got a couple of sophomores and then a number of freshmen, but first and foremost, let's talk about Mindy Pomeroy and Carolee Johnson.
Well, first of all, Carolee is a sophomore. She was a walk-on last year for us from Blackhawk Christian School. Carolee is probably improved more in softball than a lot of girls that I've ever seen. She came in, was lanky, long, and tall, and she works hard, very, very hard, and her throwing was not real good from the outfield. We're using her as an outfielder, and it's really improved. And the only reason it improved, she's worked on the off season and become a lot better. Hitting, she probably has the quickest wrist of any girl on our team. She's tall, but she's got quick wrists, so she's going to help us. She's made some key hits this fall, and hopefully she's going to make a lot of key hits come this spring. Mindy Pomeroy. Well, how can I describe Mindy Pomeroy? What a great gal. She's somebody that I keep right on the edge at all times. Let me tell you a little quick story. I don't want to tell you all the stories about Mindy, but I'll tell you a quick story. We were down this fall at IUPUI, And our first game was against University of Indianapolis, and our team has never beat the University of Indianapolis, and we won that game. That's the game that Crystal Fisher blew her ACL out, but Mindy Mason, which I'll talk about later, she was the pitcher against University of Indianapolis, and she won that game. Then the second game that night, or that day, was at 7 o'clock at night. We played Ball State. So Mindy, that was her job. She was on the mound pitching, and it was such an exciting game. We were up 3-1 in the top of the seventh, and we were the home team, so Ball State was up. And before she went out to pitch that inning, the top of that inning, she was kind of holding her chest, and I didn't know what was wrong with her. I thought, well, she was just, just patting her chest or whatever. She gets out on the mound, and she pitches to the first batter, and we get that batter out. And then all of a sudden, two runners get on, and then we get another out. And then I see her holding her chest, so I called timeout, walked out there, and I said, "What's wrong?" She says, "I don't know, Coach, I don't know." She says, "My chest." So I asked the umpire if we could have the trainer take a look. So we went into the dugout, and the trainer set her down and took her blood pressure and whatever, and he came over and he said, "This girl is so excited, she's sort of hyperventilating." And he said, "Well, she just calmed down, we get her back." She was so excited to win that ball game. Well, what happened is we didn't win that ball game. We went 10 innings and we lost by 1 run. But this is a great competitor, and so I kind of teased her. I said, "Now, when we get in these tight ball games, I don't want you to start hyperventilating." So, what a great kid. And I really recruited her as a center fielder, but she's been a pitcher for her last 2 years, and she had a lot of work her freshman year pitching. So, she's a great young lady.
Well, you have seniors, juniors, sophomores. You also have freshmen that you have to recruit, and we're going to talk about what it's been like on the recruiting trail in a moment. But let's talk about a number of freshmen, and boy, there's a number of them. Mindy Mason, you talked about. Tierney Green from Northside High School. Aaron Ladd, also from Fort Wayne. Angela, well, I'm going to screw this one up. Grabcheck, thank you, from Hobart. And Stephanie Clausing from Snyder High School.
Right.
Let's talk about them.
Well, let's start with Stephanie Clausing. She came as a walk-on. She came after a fall season. We lost a couple of young ladies, and we had a couple spots. And I knew she played at Snyder, and one of the other freshmen at Snyder, I talked to her and asked if she was going to our school, and she said yes. So by some means, I got a hold of her, and it worked out, and she's with us, and she's going to help us in the outfield and some other positions, and she's got some quick speed. Aaron Ladd just came with us within the last month. We did have, I'd like to carry 15 young ladies. We had 14, and it was just a kind of a coincidence. We were at Applebee's, and we had a recruit over there, and Aaron was the waitress, and somehow she said, "Oh, you're the softball coach?" Well, I played softball at Northrop High School, and then it led to that, well, where do you go to school? Oh, IPFW. And I said, well, would you be interested in playing softball? And she lit up, and so she's with us this year, and she's been practicing hard. And let me tell you a little quick story on her. First day out, within 15 minutes, her mitt broke, the ball hit her in the lip, and she had to have 6 stitches in her lip. So that's how she started her first day at IPFW softball. But a great young lady, and we're proud to have her. Angela Grabcheck. Angela from Hobart, outstanding athlete. She's our shortstop. She's just a fine young lady, a fine specimen as far as an athlete, and she works very hard, and we're just happy to have young people right now in our infield as a freshman. And there's sort of her sidekick is Tierney Green. Tierney was a student of mine at Northside when I taught there, and another outstanding young lady. And these two gals did. I saw a lot of great potential in the fall, and also the other girls, but they came through in some situations, and so we're happy to have these super kids with us. Christina Funk, another Snyder girl. I must be loading up with Snyder kids. I don't know why, but anyways, Christina Funk's a catcher. She can play infield also, but right now she's she's sort of our mainstay catcher since Crystal Fisher is injured. Christina is an excellent student. She's a pre-med student and a fine young lady and a fine athlete. Who did I leave out?
Well, you briefly mentioned Mindy Mason.
Mindy Mason, left-handed pitcher, and you always have to have. I always feel that I need a left-handed pitcher on the mound at some time. She's from Maumee, Ohio. She's a fine young lady, a fine athlete, and we're looking for a lot of great things from Mindy.
A lot of youth on this team. The fact that we're new in Division I, harder or easier to attract players on the recruiting trail?
Well, you know, Mike, I think, you know, the schedule that we have maybe helps to attract players because we're playing the Purdue's, we're playing the Michigan States, we're playing the Notre Dame, you know, and we're playing some very, very outstanding teams: Valparaiso, Oakland University, Detroit Mercy, Indiana State, Toledo, University of Toledo, Ball State. So, you know, kids want to play good teams. They're, you know, excited to play good teams. But and I, as I tell them, in order to be a good team, we have to play good teams. And we're young. We're going to take some lumps, but we're going to, you know, I told them, I sat down and we've talked several times, and I said we'll probably be the underdogs most of the time. And I said sometimes it's fun to be the underdog because you don't have a lot to lose, but you have a lot to gain. And so I think we gained a lot of respect this fall when we were playing Ball State, and we wound up going 10 innings and then getting beat by 1 run. So, and I think we surprised the Ball State coach. She sort of patted us on the back and said, you know, you got a fine young team. So we want to add to that and just get better.
Before we go into detail on the schedule, there's 2 other questions that I want to ask, time permitting. Number one, you mentioned that one of your players had ACL, Crystal had ACL surgery.
Right.
And it seems to have been a rash this year. Keon Henderson from the men's basketball team had ACL surgery last week. 2 members of the men's volleyball team had knee surgery. And I think a couple others in some of the other sports. A run of knee injuries. Any thoughts as to why it's happening now, or is it?
Well, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's just our year to have injuries, and then next year or years down the road we won't have any. You know, I don't know the answer to that. You know, sometimes they say maybe that women's knees aren't built as well as men, but we have a lot of the guys having the injury. Crystal took one bad step, turn, and boom, her knee. So, you know, I don't know the cause of it. I don't know the cost of it. Hopefully, it'll end for all our teams.
The other issue I want to briefly talk about, and I know it brings joy to you. These are student athletes, and sometimes we overlook the fact we think that they're here to play an athletic sport, but there are student athletes, and your women's team, I know, has had a number of the members of the team 3-point or higher. Talk about the importance of the classroom as opposed to the softball diamond.
Well, the first thing, you know, when I recruit a young lady, you know, I say, number one, you have to be a student, and you want to come here to get a degree in whatever career field that you're looking at, and then be a softball player, and we'll hook those 2 together. And I think if you have that combination of a great academic student and a great softball player, you really have something. And I'm very, very proud of these young ladies. Last year in the spring, we won the highest academic women's sport, highest academic of all sports. This fall, we won it again, and you know, I'm super proud of that. You know, I require them grade checks and make sure their studies are up, and I think that's just extremely important to be. You know, they're here for their academics. Also, they're here to be a good softball player. So.
Well, in our final couple of minutes, let's briefly talk about this schedule. And it starts on March the 10th. I'm assuming either get on a bus or get in some vans. I'm not sure which, but you're going to go down to Orlando, Florida. Okay. Lucky bum.
Right.
And you're going to be taking on a number of teams: Maine, Pennsylvania, Toledo, Manhattan, Monmouth, Wagner, Bucknell, Colorado State, Toledo, and Youngstown State. Then you finish the trip going to Western Illinois from the Mid-Con. Then you play your first home game on the 22nd of March against Oakland University. Then you're back on the road at Purdue to play Purdue and Oakland again. Then you got Gardner-Webb, Ball State, before you get a chance to play some home games. But some of these opponents at home Indiana Tech, Indiana Wesleyan, Michigan State, Detroit Mercy, IUPUI, St. Francis, Valpo, Indiana State, Butler. You're going to finish it off at Notre Dame, home to Huntington, and at IU. In the final few seconds, thoughts on this upcoming schedule?
Tough schedule. But again, my thoughts are we got to play good teams to be a good team, and so we'll just find out. We'll find out what we're made out of, and it's going to be exciting. Our kids are ready. They're anxious to play. It gets old practicing indoors, and as soon as we can get outdoors, we're going to do that. But we're flying down, and we're going to spend 7 days down there, and we're down there to play softball. It's our spring break also. We got 1 day off, and we'll go have fun that day. But we'll find out. When we get back, I know we have a tough schedule, and we'll just go right at it.
Well, best of luck, and we look forward to visiting with you during the course of the season here on the program. And lucky bum going to Florida. Have fun, and then we'll talk about these games when you come back.
Thanks, Mike.
Keith Fisher has been our guest, head women's softball coach here at IPFW. We'll take a break. Hopefully we'll talk with Billy Gernon. If not Billy, we'll have a surprise for you, but that's when the Mastodon Spotlight returns in just a moment.
A new century is coming, and with it, 1,000 questions. Will your family ever be in harm's way? Will a small town in Texas be hit with a hurricane? Will your daughter ever need a new kind of blood treatment? We have no crystal ball for the world that awaits. Just one promise. We'll be there.
The good earth. It gives us everything. And now you can give something back. By becoming an Earth Team volunteer, you can help the Natural Resources Conservation Service care for the good earth. Right in your own community. It's the only earth we'll ever have. Help make it a better place for all of us. Call 1-888-LAND-CARE to find out how.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. Our second half of the program this week is now going to be devoted to baseball. And we're very happy to have with us the head baseball coach here at IPFW, Billy Gernon, with us. And Billy, I know it's difficult. You're a man on the move at all times, but I do appreciate you giving us a few minutes to talk about the IPFW baseball team. And first thing I want to say outside of welcome back to the program, this is year number 3 for you here at the helm. And if you can briefly, Billy, let's talk about the progression. Year 1, year 2, and now what we hope to accomplish in year 3.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike, and it's an interesting question at the same time because I think that the almost a metamorphosis has taken place here from Division II, trying to compete for a Great Lakes Valley Conference tournament berth and maybe a championship and maybe even a College World Series berth, to a reclassification in the middle of the year of my second year, players leaving, finishing the season with unrealistic numbers, and then being in a full-fledged Division I season this year. It's really kind of hard to gauge where you've been and where you're going, but at the same time, things are going extremely well. I'm a person that's excited to be here right now, and I feel like from last year the big difference is that the light of the tunnel is a little more visible than it ever has been, and we may not be through that tunnel, but the light is clearly visible, and I think that's what's critical for myself and other coaches in our department.
When we had you on last year, it was the transitional year, and as you said, year 1 you went down to the final weekend down at the University of Indianapolis with a shot at the conference tournament on the line. And though it didn't work out, we learned some things, and you learned things about yourself and your ball club. Then last year, I don't know what the right term is to use, but it was difficult at best, where all of a sudden, not just you and your ball club, but the entire athletic department is thrown into a different situation.
Yeah, you're in a season of survival, trying to learn while you're surviving at the same time, and kudos to you, maybe a Jeopardy appearance on being able to pull that Indianapolis trivia fact from my first year, by the way. Did you research that?
I just remember it.
Hey, so I'm impressed, buddy.
Don't tell my wife.
I'm impressed. Yeah, last year I don't think you'd wish upon your worst enemy to happen in a coaching industry, but at the same time, we should be feeding off challenges, and because we're competitive-natured persons, and that last year was definitely a great challenge for me. I hope it never happens again in my career. But I think, like an old song, if you're ever going to see a rainbow, you're going to have to stand a little rain, and we saw tsunamis and hurricanes and a few other type of rainstorms last year. And the great thing about this year, Mike, is that every single player in uniform on the roster knows why they're here, and they know what exactly is going on with the university. So they've made decisions to be part of the program. So there's no issues or situations forced upon any players. It's willing involvement, and I think we've got what we need to have right now to build for the following year, and more importantly for 2004. This is a drawn-out process. You can't be looking to dominate this year. We want to win every game, obviously. You shouldn't coach if you don't. But I think in order to run fast, you got to jog a little bit first and get warmed up. And you got to walk a little bit before you start jogging at the same time. So that's the process we're looking at right now.
Before we look at your staff and your roster this year, what's the biggest thing you learned last year from that? I'm going to call it a mess, and that's my own personal adjective. But from the season last year, what's the biggest thing you learned?
Personally and professionally, last year was good for me because it taught me that I am a role model, and that my job first and foremost is to be a role model to my players. It was challenging. There was a lot of frustrating things that happened, and it taught me to harness my anger, to harness some negative thoughts that were going on, and the ways that I wanted to react and be more composed and try to demonstrate that behavior to young men who are going to need to do that someday in maybe a work situation, a family problem, or whatever. And I feel like I became a better person because of that season, and I hope that was able to be passed on to some of the players that are gone and some of the players that are here. It doesn't always go the way you want it to, but that doesn't mean you can't compete and fight in that particular arena. Even if the odds are stacked against you, you still have to fight, and that's what we're trying to preach to our guys this year.
Well, let's take a look at the 2002 version of IPFW men's baseball, and the first person that I'd like to ask you to talk about is your new assistant coach.
Yeah, Blaine McFerrin is he's an assistant coach because he loves the game, but he's in a situation where he'd probably be enjoying playing more. He lost a year of eligibility. He had it's called a non-participation red shirt his first year at Kentucky Wesleyan out of high school. And because of medical reason didn't force him to red shirt, he then only had 4 years to play for instead of 5 years to play for. Now, had it been a medical situation, he would have gotten that year back. But he didn't, and he had a medical situation the first year that you had referred to where we made a run for that conference tournament, and he participated in 21% of the games. And NCAA says it's got to be less than 20%. So when we petitioned, they denied him. So he lost a season of eligibility, basically. But he's handled it real well. He's been a great addition to our program. He's a kid that brings a lot of responsibility, even though he's 23. He's almost done with his master's in education here on the campus. He's only got, I think, 9 hours left. He's very loyal, and he's very dependable, and that's what a head coach needs. And he's a guy that I can count on, so I'm fortunate to have him as an assistant coach.
Not only that, there's this magical word called experience, and we're going to talk about this later. You have a very young ball club.
Very young.
But he played for you.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what your expectations are on a team and individual level, and he also was a pitcher, if my memory is correct, and I did do some research on that one. And he'll be able to help your pitching staff.
Yeah, he resonates, like you said, the things that we talk about. And Mike, I believe that there are things that have to be taught prior to how to field a baseball and how to hit a baseball, and such as punctuality, high levels of intensity, making it important to want to win. Winning is not the most important thing, but we feel like wanting to win is. And he knows that, like you said, from being around me. And I'm not, I don't profess to be the greatest baseball coach that ever played, but the program's run the way I want it to be run. And he helps segue that material to the players when it needs to be and when it doesn't need to be. And yeah, you're right. And that's why I want to build this program with coaches that played for me. Then you don't have to teach again. He is young, he's never coached before, but he's handled losing a year of eligibility and transitioning into a professional role as well as I could have expected anybody to do.
Well, let's begin looking at the roster if we can, and we'll start now, and we'll probably end up taking a break midway, and then we'll finish the next segment. We said there's an awfully young team, and I'm looking at the roster, and I'm looking, and I see 3 seniors, unless I'm mistaken.
4.
4. Okay, well.
It's okay.
Let's talk about the seniors first.
Yeah, we've got a great group of seniors. There's great disparity, as you said, in the class of our players, and I don't mean class like whether you have any or not, but I mean senior to a freshman. We have 4 seniors, 1 junior, and then the remaining team is sophomore and freshman. The senior class, we have Nate Hoggett, Jason Widmar, Joel Lesher, and Rich Hale. All 3 of these guys were here when I got here in 1999, and this is their 3rd year with me. Rich Hale is our senior catcher. He was on a medical red shirt last year with a broken wrist and some knee problems. Jason Widmar is a senior right fielder. Nate Hoggett's been moved from third base to center field where he's doing a good job for us, and Joel Lesher's our left fielder. So our outfield and our catcher position is all seniors, and they've been given good leadership all year, bringing good energy levels to the practices, and they were all here when we had that great run that year and set the school record for conference wins. So they kind of have a feel for what's going on and what I want, and I've been more than delighted with their performances on and off the baseball field so far this year, and I hope they continue to lead like they have by example more than anything.
One thing we should mention that the baseball season is already underway as we tape this segment, and we'll get into that in the next segment. You played a couple of ball games, I think 3 to be exact. So the season is going, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are certain guidelines, as in other sports, where you can and cannot have official practices, but for the most part, in a manner of speaking, it's a year-round job now.
Yeah, it is a year-round job. Your off-season, you're allowed to, for individual sessions, you can work with 4 players at a time, and you're allowed to work with them 2 hours per week. If you're not using baseballs, bats, and necessary equipment to play the game and doing agility work and doing weight training and stuff like that, you can work with your entire group 8 hours per week in that facet of preparation. Now that we're into the season, we're allowed 20 hours per week with a mandatory day off, no more than 4 hours per day with the entire team. So the restrictions are a lot easier to follow during your season, which began January the 14th for us, and the off season is kind of a different animal in itself, but it's easier, Mike, to abide by those rules because you can only lift and run so long. It's not where you maybe want to reset double cuts and set your base runners in live situations where it's a more drawn out process, and let's do some running drills and some agility drills and some weightlifting. So yeah, but we're in the middle of the season, or not in the middle, but it's started already. We played in Tennessee and had 58-degree weather Friday, same on Saturday, and got snow on Sunday, around 32. Still wasn't bad. We were able to play.
That's the bottom line.
That's right.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to go over the rest of the roster with Billy Gurden. We're also going to look at the schedule, and hopefully I got a couple of zingers for him, but that's when Mastodon Spotlight returns in just a moment.
trial by fire. It is a rite of passage, a challenge to join the elite. And if you succeed, if you can master your fear, outsmart your enemy, and never yield even to yourself, you will be changed forever. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. Our emphasis this half of the program is men's baseball. Our guest is the head baseball coach here at IPFW, Billy Gernon, and I'm delighted to have you because it's never a dull moment, literally. We were in the process of talking about the roster this year, and we want to pick it up. You've got one junior, I believe, and an underclassman, so let's continue on with our one junior, Billy Banks.
Yeah, Billy is a transfer from Mineral Resource Community College somewhere in Missouri. Don't ask me where it is. I just know it was in Missouri somewhere. He's a kid that originally is from Mishawaka, Mishawaka High School, and he has some career statistics that he still holds there. And he's a kid that brings a lot of power to our lineup. Still got a few holes in his swing, but he's tightened that up a little bit. He's become a little more of a disciplined hitter. Had a big home run for us this weekend. Had double, threw up some good slugging numbers, and that's what we need from him. And he's a kid too, Mike, that leads extraordinarily well by example. He's a lot like the Jason Widmar kid that we have that's a senior. He never complains about anything, no matter what's going on. I've asked him to catch bullpens and to go beyond what most players are asked to do, and the kid just smiles and does it with intensity and gives me everything he has all the time, and I'm thankful to have him on the club because of that. The rest of the team, you know, Mike, are freshmen and sophomores, and we'll let those guys earn the right to get mentioned on this show maybe later on in the season. Maybe it should be a little more of an honor to be mentioned on this show than just to throw some names out, because I have some high expectations of these young players. And I think that before they get mentioned on here and they start, you know, running around in their sociology class telling Judy, hey, did you hear my name mentioned last night? We're trying to take a real serious approach this year, Mike, with our young players. We want to stay away from having any kind of excuses for a bad or a good or an indifferent season. We just want to stay focused on bringing a high level of energy to the game every single time that we play, and that we play with intensity from the first pitch to the last out, and not having a letdown anywhere in the fourth or the seventh, because we saw examples this weekend where we came out of the gate early and the team fights back. But what I liked the most out of this weekend, even with an 0-3 start, is that I saw some fight in our players, and the things that caused us to lose, and there were some things that did cause us to lose. Pitching was off. Our defense was not solid enough. We had some offense. And then there were some situational debacles that we had, which all in my mind can be fixed with just some additional work and some repetition. So we were delighted at that to see the fact that we feel like we've got enough of an arsenal and enough firepower that we're going to cause some teams some problems. But we are a team that can't show up and count on a Mark McGuire to drive in a grand slam in the seventh and so forth like that. We've got to have consistent, intense performances from all of our players, or we're going to be rather easy to beat, in my opinion. And I hope our guys are watching this and they let this sink in even deeper than it has. That we've been harping on it over and over and over again.
If you don't mind, I would like to make one exception to a player, and I have a particular reason for it.
Sure.
And I mentioned him during the break. Doug McDonald from West Noble was actually here on campus last year, but could not play due to an injury. And that's the reason I wanted to bring it up. Physically, has he recovered from his injury? And then the follow-up question to that, and I asked Keith about this earlier in the program today, because one of his girls had to have ACL surgery. And there's been a rash of injuries here on campus this year. Keon Henderson from the men's basketball team had ACL surgery last week. 2 members of the men's volleyball team, Jeff Patak and Maddie Bashevsky, had knee surgery. And I believe in soccer, I think there was an injury as well. But first and foremost, is Doug physically back from a health perspective? And then B, your perspective on why we seem to have this rash of injuries right now in this modern day of everyone hitting the weight room and bulking up and working out and so forth. Why are we having the injuries?
Now, first on Doug. Doug played a little bit of the season last year, but entered in so late and was unable to prepare, and we needed him to get some exposure to college baseball. He threw, I think, only 15 to 17 innings. Did well in places and didn't do so well in places, but didn't have the opportunity to prepare like the other guys did in the off season because he was injured and had a severe back problem and had some elbow trouble. He got a little bit of activity this weekend, didn't do as well as he expected or as I expected him to do, but Doug's going to be just fine. Doug's a very competitive natured person. He's a workhorse. He's an animal when it comes to conditioning, and he is a team guy, and yeah, it's good that you brought him up because he's been through some tough, some adverse situations, and he's come through with a big smile on his face and as a winner. To respond to part B of your question with the rash of injuries, I don't have an answer to that. I think my gut instinct just tells me that that's the nature of the beast, that we get athletic people in a competitive arena, and we're asking our bodies. I mean, I'm going to use Patak as an example. He's probably as a good athlete on this campus with his leaping ability and so forth, and as a quality volleyball player as he is, and you think about the pressure that he's taking on those knees every time he comes down, and I think you can prepare and over-prepare, and some of it's luck, in my personal opinion. Whether or not a guy lands on somebody else's ankle, whether or not he makes a cut and he slips just a little bit because there's condensation or sweat on the floor, whether or not a baseball player runs the base and as he attacks first, his foot just catches an angle instead of the top of the bag and he rolls it. Some of it's luck. I don't think there's a gap in anything we're doing as a university and as coaches. I think we're just hitting a string of them, and you know what's probably going to happen is we're going to hit a string where we don't have any. I think it'll all balance out. But yeah, it is kind of ironic, the things that are happening, especially with the knees. We're in pretty good shape right now, so if we get an ACL this weekend, you don't want to have me on the show that following.
Let me get into a couple other
Let me mention one more thing real fast.
Okay.
I said I wasn't going to mention anybody, but David Zachary was a pretty big recruit for me, and Western Michigan had some interest in him. Purdue had shown a little bit of interest in Ball State, had showed some interest late. And he signed here and was a very valuable recruit along with the other players. He's no more valuable than anybody else to me. But I think his weekend deserves a notation in the fact that the kid was 8 for 15. He was recruited predominantly as a pitcher, threw pretty well, faced Lincoln Memorial, who is a very, very solid Division II baseball team. Their 3, 4, and 5-hole hitters are All-Americans. And they were All-Americans against David, too. But he was 8 for 15 and had a couple big RBIs for us. And for a freshman to go out his opening weekend and to hit over 500, I think it exceeded my expectations and maybe even his. Maybe not, but it exceeded mine. So I don't feel too bad about mentioning that. He's a humble person. He won't let this go to his head. But, you know, when a kid goes out and performs like that, I don't know what else this show would be used for other than to recognize that performance and that effort.
You're very big, as most every coach here on the staff is, in regards to the educational part. I mean, these are student athletes, and I know it's important to you, it's important to Keith, Kelly, Arnie, Doug, Bruce, everybody. Mm-hmm. Your team, they hit the books first before they hit the diamond. Yeah,
they do. I'm from down in the Louisville, Kentucky area, just in New Albany, Indiana, and I guess some people, when they hear my 5s and 9s, that still hadn't gone away. I just can't make myself say 5 for some reason. But there's a great horse race down in that area called the Kentucky Derby, and if you figure there's 2 great horses in that race, and one of the horses' names is Academic, and the other one's name is Athletic, that you better put your money on the Academic horse because it better win. But we want that race to be so close that the stewards have to really take a look at that photo for the finish. But the academic horse has got to win that race, and we preach that. Doesn't win it by a lot, but it wins it, because most kids might come to play, they want to play sports. Sure, they're here to get a degree, but they feed on the athletic side of the two faces of campus, and we were able to get a 2.9 and some change again this semester in the fall, and I'm real proud to say, and it's not all my doings, I think the environment that we create does assist it, but our team has been able to maintain right around a 3.0 ACUM since I've been here, and that's probably, I'm more proud of that than anything we've done, including the conference record, or wins for conference victories here. There's really nothing more valuable on campus than that itself.
We look ahead, and we mentioned earlier that you got an awfully young team. From the recruiting aspect, the fact that we are the new kids on the block in terms of Division I status, has it been easier or more difficult for you in your travels and in your recruiting process to hopefully lure a student athlete on the premise that he may, if he busts his chops both in the classroom and on the diamond, get a chance to play early?
The answer to that is both. And the reason it's both is it's been harder because now we're recruiting against Indiana, Purdue, Notre Dame, Michigan State, Valparaiso, Butler, Ball State, just to name a few, Evansville, Indiana State. All the quality teams in Indiana want those quality Indiana players. And right now our scholarship situation, though it has improved dramatically, is still more centralized on Indiana players. The out-of-state money's not there yet, so we're more dependent on homegrowners, okay? And the reason that it's gotten better, in my opinion, is because now we do have a carrot that we can put on the table and make a kid and his family have to think about that. And we're focusing most of that money on the bump as far as pitching. We want to feel like that if we can't stop a hitter, why do we want to have hitters? So we're focusing our recruiting endeavors on pitching. And our market right now, Mike, I think stands alone by itself on stage, and that no other Division I school in the state could preach this like we do, is impact opportunity right now. If you got a kid that's going to go to Purdue, which Coach Schreiber, it's a great program, he's a great guy and a great coach. But David Zachary's a great example. He comes here and he's in our rotation. He's in our starting rotation, and the kid may have been 8, 9, or 10 at Purdue. Now, by coming to IPFW, he gets dramatic exposure, scout exposure, playing time, and in my personal opinion, he develops his game, because the game, Mike, develops on the battlefield. You prepare it in practice, but a kid does not develop himself and his game until that first pitch is thrown, and that's between the lines, and that's what we offer players. So a kid that's got aspirations of playing pro ball and maybe leaving his junior year or possibly his senior year can come to IPFW and can look at his stats after his freshman year and see 70 innings, where he might be at a big school and see 20. That's his choice from that point right there. So we put a carrot on the table, an opportunity right next to it, and that's the best offer we have to make. And the opponents that we have are definitely recruiting tools. Our university, with class size, with the ratio of students to professor, the study table programs, the Big Ten degree, I mean, that makes us a viable competitor. And I've got, I should say we have 5 or 6 guys that we're expecting to sign in April, and if they do, I may pass out, because it's going to exceed my expectations, and it's going to tell me we're doing some things right on the money. And if we get half of those guys, it'll be about what I expect. And I think we've got a great chance of getting them. There's one of them is a catcher that a scout has already told me is going to be a late draft, and some very talented pitchers, and one very, very solid power hitter. And if we can get those guys, all of a sudden the missing pieces of the puzzle start to show up from under the rug and from behind the couch and from under the sofa, you know what I'm saying? So I don't want ever my players or anybody on this campus to think that we are not focused on this year, but I think anytime you make a transition, just like starting your own business, you can't expect to maximize your profits in that first 12 months, but you expect to build some pretty valuable things in that first year.
I'm told by John that we're out of time.
What do you know?
I'm going to save my I'm going to save my zinger for the next time we get together, so you get to think about what that may or may not be. But
you guys don't have the power to overrun the schedule, huh?
I'm staying out of that one. Thanks a bunch for coming in.
Yeah.
Good luck. And,
always enjoy being here.
We're going to try to work things out where we can get you on more often this year. And You see, season's underway, and shortly you go down to Tennessee and then down to Florida, so you lucky bum, as Keith is as well. Safe trips, good luck, and we'll see you shortly down the road.
Thanks, Mike.
Billy Gernon has been our guest the second half of the program, head men's baseball coach here at IPFW. We thank Billy, along with Keith Fisher, the women's softball coach, for their appearance today. And as always, we thank you, the viewer, for tuning in to Mastodon Spotlight to see what's going on with IPFW athletics. We invite you to come back next week when we'll have Bruce Patterson or Chris Paul on to sum up the women's basketball season, which ends this week, and may have another surprise or two as well. But that's next week. And until next week, this is Mike Maas saying, have a great week, and go Dons. Last week, the IPFW women's basketball team concluded their season as they traveled down to Indianapolis and took on IUPUI. On this week's edition of Mastodon Spotlight, we're going to talk with head coach Bruce Patterson. We're going to look back not only at that ball game, but look back at the entire season as well. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And we'll look ahead to next year, hopefully in the second part of the segment with Bruce. In the second half of the show this week, we're going to talk with Mike Jewell, Sports Information Director, and Jay Cohen, reporter from the Journal-Gazette. Our program is called Mastodon Spotlight, and it's coming up next. Hi again, everybody. I'm Mike Maas. Welcome once again to Mastodon Spotlight. Well, as I said a moment ago, the IPFW women's basketball team concluded the first season under head coach Bruce Patterson last week. They traveled down to Indianapolis, took on the Jaguars of IUPUI, and unfortunately came out on the short end of an 84-74 decision. But we have with us head coach Bruce Patterson to talk about that game and to talk about the season in general. And first and foremost, are you glad the season's over?
Well, I think you want to answer that in two ways. Certainly, for a coaching staff that has not been used to losing as many ball games as we lost and to only win 4 ball games, certainly we're excited about taking this opportunity to start to building for next year. You know, we had some great kids, some kids that worked hard. We just were in some physical mismatches in almost every game, practically every game that we played in, and therefore it will be nice to try to build a situation where we're not in that situation after a while.
Last time we talked, you traveled to Kalamazoo. We played Western Michigan, a game we nearly won. We had the lead until 47 seconds were left. And then we came home and had the home finale against Lipscomb, a game we broadcast on College 56. And again, we were there for most of the game. and just fell behind at the end. Getting ready for the finale at IUPUI last week, what was the preparation like? Because you had the Saturday game, and then I know Sunday you gave the team a day off, and then you basically had Monday to get ready, and then Tuesday you went down and took on a team that had won 3 in a row going into that ball game and had some confidence.
Mm-hmm. Well, preparation was difficult because the schedule was lined up in such a way that we didn't have much time off in between, and that's kind of a function of being an independent. You really can't choose necessarily when and where you want to play. You have to play whenever the other team is available. But in all honesty, we made a decision way back at the Eastern Michigan game when we came back, and I think you and I talked about this on one of the previous shows, that our preparation, that we obviously are looking at the other team, trying to find tendencies and strengths and best players and that kind of stuff, but our preparation all dealt with us. Our biggest problem during the year is trying to deal with our own abilities and other things, and so I don't think that was a cause for us to win or lose a basketball game. We were in a situation where we just have to perform to probably our best of our abilities in most games just to match up physically with the other teams that we were against. So we just tried to get ready to do that.
Well, as I said, the final score was 84-74. Mm-hmm. I think the team was in it. It's a closer game, I think, from what I heard, than the final score. I know one person who obviously played well was Amy Meyer.
Amy got hot, especially in the first half, and quite frankly, held us in the ball game. She shot the basketball extremely well from the outside, and that's always crucial to us because we don't have the size to be able to dig the ball into the paint and score at will. So we have to shoot the basketball from outside, and Amy was a very successful shooter that evening. She shot I think she had 17 in the first half. I think they made some adjustments at halftime and said, we better go find that kid and make sure she doesn't get that number of shots off, and they did a good job of that, and I credit them for that. But on the other hand, I think all in all, we played hard with them. We were in the basketball game right up to the very end, but the same Achilles heel that gets us over a period of time is that we just seem to wear down when other teams are running 8, 9, 10 kids at you, and we're limited to 7 or 8. That's a substantial limitation, and especially when you talk about the size difference, because they just kind of beat you up physically.
The season's now over in terms of actually playing games on the floor. When we look back at it, we started off first game Division I. You took your team to Chicago and came back with an overtime 84-83 win against a mid-con opponent. Good feelings, and but then reality, maybe reality is not the right word, but reality started to set in the sense that, hey, this is a big step for these gals to go from Division II to Division I. And we've talked about it on prior shows. It is a big step to go from 2 to 1.
It's an amazing step. We spent I spent a long time coaching at a different level at NAIA, and we used to play a lot of NAIA teams and Division II teams, and quite frankly, many times the guard play is very good at those levels. What you don't see at those levels at all is the big kids, and you talk about the Chicago State game, and in a way Chicago State was unique because they had no chance of seeing what our deficiencies were. And what really got to us over the course of the season was, and you could see the repetition happening from game to game to game, is how one team figured out how to beat you, how to score on you at will. And every other team then reviewing that tape would be back doing the same thing when they had the same advantage. And that just wore on you after the season went on. Chicago State, unfortunately for them, didn't have that opportunity. And we were able to go down there, and them not knowing anything about us, we were able to execute the things that we had to do to win the basketball game. I don't know that next year we hope not to have the weaknesses other teams can exploit like that.
Well, as I say, we came off with the season opening win, then went on the road, played Morehead State, and a good Morehead State team, as we found out on 2 occasions, beat us. Then we had the home opener against Army, And it was a game that we could have won. And there was lots of coulda, shoulda, wouldas, didn't. We were in the ball game for the most of it, for the bulk of the game, but ended up on the short end of the store, 82-73. And then one of the turning points of the season, you went down to Muncie. And you took on a Ball State team that's a very good Ball State team, one of their better teams, under a first-year coach there. But the turning point came early in the ball game when you lost your point guard, Lindsey Wernst.
Well, this team took a lot of beatings along the year. I mean, we could go back and you said if and buts were candy, we'd all be fat type thing. We had a lot of situations that really turned our season. Obviously, losing Becky Schuster early in the year to an automobile accident turned our season. Going down there, having a 23, 24-year-old point guard with experience was incredibly important to us. If you look at the Chicago State stat sheet, I think she had mid-teens in points and 0 turnovers, and that's what you expect out of a kid who's been around a long time. Well, we were in the Ball State game. I mean, right up first half. I think the last 2-3 minutes they pulled away to take it out to like a 15-point lead or something like that. But halfway through the first half, we were in pretty good shape. Then Lindsey takes the shot to the head. The biggest part of that was that everybody knew on that bench from one end to the other that was the end of her career, because that was part of the deal that was cut with her when she came back with all the other head injuries, that if she got another one, we would not put her in that environment again. And so I think there was a depression that set in, and so the competitive level dropped substantially. And frankly, in the second half, we didn't compete with them mentally. Forget the physical side. I mean, physical is what it is. I mean, if you're 6'2", opposed to 5'8", that's one thing. But if mentally you can go in and compete, you can stay in most ball games, as we proved in an awful lot of basketball games. But that was a big hit to us, and frankly, it was something that set us back quite a ways.
Well, following that setback, and as you say, that has a lingering effect on these gals. Again, we don't realize sometimes Lindsey was unique in that I think she's 24, 23 or 24.
23. Every time I say 24, she gets mad at me.
But
I think she's 24 now, by the way.
But I think you have some gals that were 18, 19, 20.
Sure.
And you and I both know, being parents, that there's a big difference between an 18-year-old and a 23-year-old in a number of ways. And that loss did affect this basketball team, and it lasted, in some cases, in some areas, for the rest of the season.
Well, we had to take, when Lindsey went down, one of the first things we had to do is we had to move Courtney Nicely from a 2-guard, which is where we wanted her to be, over, and where she'll eventually end up. We just had that conversation with her less than a couple hours ago, back to a point guard. And Courtney is a marvelous player, and she's going to be a great player by the time she leaves here. She's fun to watch, she's fun to be around, she's just a terrific young player. But putting her as a point guard, a starting point guard, in an environment where an awful lot of good quality defensive point guards are all over you, she had a number of turnovers, and we lived with them and lived and died with them, because it was really our only source to do it. And God bless her, she did a marvelous job at it, but it had an effect on us all around. One, it took the ball out of her hands sometimes when we would have liked to have had it in our hands for an opportunity to score. And two, it put her in a position where she got a little frustrated. And if there's a difference between 18 and 19-year-olds and 24-year-olds is how they handle frustration. And our biggest joy with Courtney all year long was, when you make a mistake and when you start getting angry, you've got to settle down. We've got to let you relax and get back into it, as opposed to just leaving you out there and letting that frustration build. So yeah, it had a lingering effect.
We're going to take a little break right now. When we come back, we'll continue our review of the just completed women's basketball season, and we're going to look ahead, because 2002-2003 does look to be promising in a number of ways. But we'll talk about that and more when Mastodon Spotlight returns in just a moment.
A Stargate. That's the door to other worlds that my character Tilk and the rest of my team use on Stargate SG-1. It's a door to exploration and exciting adventure. And education can provide you with a similar passageway to a world full of possibilities. So stay in school and graduate.
According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, it kills over 1,500 people every year and injures 71,000 more. Inadequate sleep has been linked to health and safety risks, even premature death. But today, new treatments are helping millions get the sleep they need. So talk to your doctor or take our free risk assessment on the web at sleepfoundation.org. Sleep deprivation. It's real, it's dangerous, and it's more treatable than ever.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. We're visiting with the head women's basketball coach here at IPFW, Bruce Patterson. We're reviewing the season that was just completed last week, and we're going to try to pick up where we left off, Bruce. We talked about the injury to Lindsey Wernston, how that affected the team in some ways. But then there's a couple of games I want to point to. Early December, we took on Wright State University here. It's a game we broadcast, and we got a home victory. 89-78, played very well. But I know that was a tough stretch at that point of the season because 4 days later, there was a game that you were very concerned about when the University of North Texas came to town. And I know we talked about it, how talented they were, that they had played some top 25 teams and played them tough. And you were very, very concerned. And I know privately, I think we can say it now, you were concerned that they may blow us out by 30 or 40 points. And yet, now that we can look back at it, that was a game that your gals played hard and nearly won. They lost 68-66, I believe, but they really showed some signs of playing to some potential. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about that game, if we can, a little bit, and what we thought and hoped might develop from there.
Well, interesting you say that, by the way, because I happened to be watching TV, I believe it was last night or the night before, and Baylor was on. And Baylor is a very good basketball team. I think they're ranked in the top 10, and they were, I think they were playing Oklahoma State University, and they won that ball game. They had a really talented point guard. And the reason I say that is because right before they came down to play us, North Texas came to play us, they had played Baylor at Baylor and lost to them by, like, I think it was 6 or 7 or something like that. It was less than 10 points. And you're right, Mike. That was one of the games that we had marked in red on the calendar, saying, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? We know this is a bad matchup problem." They were big, they were strong, they were experienced, they were all those things. And the kids played at a magic level. And if you remember the beginning of that game, we did have some wet spots on the floor. I mean, we played really poorly for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then all of a sudden we kind of settled in and got into the stride of the game. And as I recall it, we had a 3 that rattled with about a minute left to go with a point lead. That had it gone down, I think we would have walked out of here with a win. And Amy Gerald's had one that rattled and it came out. Kids played really well. We have shown signs along the way. I had a long meeting with Mark Pope the other day, the athletic director, and basically reviewing the season and all that kind of stuff. And frankly, there were 6 games this year that we played awful. And when I say awful, I don't mean physically awful as much as I do mentally awful, where we never really got into the game, and for us to compete, we have to do that. Other than that, North Texas happens to be the bright shining star that you look at, or Western Michigan was the bright shining star, either one of those 2 games. For that matter, Toledo I thought was a bright shining star. It's a game I believe we either led or it was very close at halftime, and we were right in the ball game until the last 8-9 minutes. I can live with those things, and we played very well. But those 5 or 6 games are the ones that you try to wipe out of your mind, and you try to build on the other ones.
Yeah, well, as you say, North Texas won, then Western Michigan, a home game the 23rd of December, just before Christmas, a Sunday afternoon, and you played perhaps your best 20 minutes of consistent, solid basketball, got a big lead, and we hung on because Western is a good team, as we found out when we went to Kalamazoo a couple of weeks ago. But it was an 81-77 win on the home court. over a Mid-American Conference team, a team, as it turned out, when we found out when we went to Kalamazoo, they got on a winning streak of sorts, and they were challenging for the top of the MAC, both in the division and the overall, to try to get a good seed for their tournament coming up. But a big win there. And then the holidays came, and then you had to travel. And I know we've talked a little bit before about the difficulties of student athletes, even though it was on Christmas break. You go down to Eastern Kentucky, you play 2 games, you come back, you got like a day and a half break, then you get on an airplane, you get down to the Bahamas, play a couple of games. It was not the fun and sun, and I know you mentioned that. You had a situation where Laura Douglas got hurt early on, and you also had a situation coming up after that, or leading in that point, just prior to that, I should say, where you found out that you lost 2 players, and happened to be your 2 tallest players on the squad, due to academics. And that, again, it's another of the many turning points of the year. I know we've talked about it before. Let's briefly talk about it again. You lost Kathy Hay and you lost Faria Bibbs due to the academics, and that hurt in more ways than one.
Well, again, it's one of those things like losing Lindsay. You know, you lose a key element of what you're doing and what you're trying to build on, and then all of a sudden you lose another segment, and now you've got to start playing a little deeper into your bench. And even though we thought we had got some quality play out of some of those kids, it really did end up in a size mismatch. That's really, I honestly believe, had we not lost those 2 players, that we would have won probably somewhere around 7, 8, 9 ball games. I believe we had control of enough games. Had we had the depth and had the height inside, we would have had a chance we would have won 8, 9 games. And quite frankly, that would have been a very satisfying year. So what happened there was critical to us. But yeah, I can't do anything about it. You know, and you know, once it was done, the school, with the integrity of the greatest of integrity, which I admire this school and educational institution for, said these kids did not perform in the classroom, and because they didn't, they're not going to be eligible to play. And that's the way it should be. These are student athletes, and if they don't take care of that part, then they don't deserve the right, the honor to be on the court. You know, all we can do is go on from there, and I think the kids did a great job of rallying behind it and trying to do it, because we came back right after that, if you remember. That was the Western Michigan game, I believe,
yeah,
and
that's right.
that we won. You know, and I think that was a case of the kids stepping up and saying, we're going to prove that we can still play.
And they did. But that was a big loss, and as we found out later, and it seemed to be that way pretty much the rest of the way. When you're hampered because you lose your point guard with experience, and you lose your 2 tallest players, and as we ended up playing more and more teams that had a number of gals, 6', 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", when your tallest girl now becomes 5'11", or 5'10", 5'11", we found out just how tough it was to try to defend and to try to score inside.
Well, I want you to come over and identify the one that's 5'11" for me, will you?
On the roster, Catherine Seawright's listed at 5'11".
Yeah, that is true. But Kat likes to play on the perimeter. She really doesn't like to go inside, and so I can't consider her to be an inside player, nor would she consider herself to be an inside player. We truly were starting basically 5'9", 5'10" inside. And, you know, nobody works any harder than those 2 kids do. I mean, that's Laura Douglas and Tiara Dudley, and they work their tail off. But when you get locked up behind somebody who's 6'3" or 6'4", I mean, that's just hard to handle. When you're giving up 5 to 6 inches in height and another 3 to 4 or 5 inches in reach, people are just reaching up over the top of you. And where we got killed was on the boards. I mean, our average deficit on the boards had to be in the teens. I haven't seen the final stats, but there were many games where we got rebounded by 20. And you know, we can talk about positioning, and we work on rebounding every day, but eventually, you know, that much height advantage. It's like 7-footers playing with 6'5" guys in the men's game.
Yeah. Well, we had some other opportunities, and I remember the Western game. I remember. Again, it's a game that came down to the last 47 seconds, and then they went on a final run, and we missed a couple of shots. But they were still competitive. We ran into a situation with some teams, especially came in on our floor, that shot 56, 60, 63, 64% from the floor. regardless whether it was inside where we didn't have the height or on the outside where some talented shooters hit the threes, some teams that can hit, and you know this as well as anybody, you get some teams that hit some shots and the confidence just builds and builds and it goes from there. But when it's all said and done, 4-23. Doesn't sound good. I know it doesn't feel good for you, Chris, and the rest of the staff and the team, but it's history. Briefly, in the last 3 minutes that we've got, I'll throw a couple of numbers out, and then I want to get into the next year. Scoring standpoint, Amy Gerald's just under 15 points a game, Hillary Kulik 11, Tiara 9.5, Courtney 9 points, Amy Meyer just under 9, and so forth. Rebounding, Tiara 5.5 boards a game, led the team. Amy and Laura, or Amy Gerald's and Laura, just over 4 rebounds apiece. Let's see, assists, Hillary just under 3 assists, Laura and Courtney around 2.5. But the season's done. You lose some players. You lose a Laura Douglas. You lose Lindsay and Chrissy Miller, who came in and helped out. Next year is a new year, and I know you and I have talked about, hey, you're going to need a scorecard because you need to get some other players for the departed seniors. What are your biggest needs for next year by position?
Well, there ain't any secret that we got to have some 5s. You know, hopefully Kath is going to take care of what she needs to take care of and will be eligible again. And we have signed another 5, a 6'2" kid to come in to help us out. We're still out on the market looking for one. We're going junior college route in a lot of different places trying to find somebody to be able to handle that. Frankly, the other position we really want to get in here is we want to get a couple true point guards. We've signed a couple true point guards and we're really happy with them. Signed and committed a couple of them. As you know, I'm not allowed to talk about them on air or who they are or where they are, but we've signed a couple, and frankly, we're looking at a junior college market at another one that's a very potent young player that I'm just real excited about. So we know we got to fill those 2 positions, both ends of the court, the big and the small. We got to fill. We've got shooters. We know we've got shooters. You know, some of the kids that we've signed, they are dramatic scorers, and so we know we got a lot of points coming in here. We got to get somebody who can get on the boards and help us save that, and somebody can get the ball up and down the court.
We've had time for one more question. If we stretch it, John, we're going to try. Next year's schedule is almost all set. Briefly, I know there's one big game that I know you're excited about, and when I heard about it, I'm excited about. Talk about some of the opponents next year that we're going to play.
Well, you remember that I told you one of the first times we ever met, and I talked to you on this program, that we would make sure that we played competitive basketball teams. And we have scheduled to go to Notre Dame on January the 2nd. And that's a big game for us. It's an opportunity for us to get, you know, a little national exposure. And we're excited about that opportunity to go up there and do that. But before that, we actually go to Minnesota first shot out to go up and play in Williams Arena, and Brenda has done a marvelous job with that team. Took them from being, I think, 1-15 in the league to the point where they were ranked at one point this year as high as 15th in the country. So we're excited about doing that. Texas A&M is on the schedule to go down there for a tournament, and that will be a thrill.
You'll get a treat, because I used to live in Waco, Texas, and I used to see Baylor and A&M come and play. They stand on their feet from start to finish, and they don't rest.
Well,
and
good.
It'll be an interesting experience for you.
I love rowdy crowds, and I love rowdy crowds whether they're for me or against me. I think that if there's one part that the women's basketball programs get cheated out of, is getting to play in front of really rowdy crowds. So that won't bother me an iota. Whether to bother our kids, we'll find out. I know we will have 7 to 8 freshmen on the roster, so they better be ready to go.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you from a personal standpoint. Thank you and Chris and everyone we've had in here on the team. You've been quite supportive to us, and we appreciate that very, very much. And we look forward to bigger and better things in the future. We will have you on sometime in April or May once you've been able to finish signing some people and can announce the signings. We're going to have a show where we'll talk about who you've got coming in next year, and maybe we can talk more about this upcoming schedule. But again, thank you much for coming in all these times. And
thank you for having us.
And we look forward to a bigger and better relationship as time goes on.
Okay.
Bruce Patterson has been our guest, head women's basketball coach here at IPFW. We'll take a break, and when we come back, the comedy team of Mike Jewell, SID here at the university, and Jay Cohen, reporter for the Journal-Gazette. But that's when Mastodon Spotlight returns in just a moment.
It is more than a trial by fire. It is a rite of passage, a challenge to join the elite. And if you succeed, if you can master your fear, outsmart your enemy, and never yield even to yourself, you will be changed forever. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. Time for the second half of our show this week, and we brought along a couple of hoodlums to speak about IPFW athletics. To my immediate right, Sports Information Director Mike Jewell, and to Mike's right, from the Journal-Gazette, Jay Cohen. And Jay, this is your first time on the program. Thanks for finally getting here.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
Little inside joke, folks. It's the third time we've tried to make arrangements, and fortunately, the third time is the charm. So we are happy to have Jay with us, along with Mike. And I guess first thing, Jay, for the benefit of some of our viewers that read you in the paper but don't know much about you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, I'm from Cincinnati originally. I went to school at High University, and then spent about 4 to 5 months in Israel working for the Associated Press Bureau. And through there, there was one of the reporters there went to high school actually with the college with the editor at the Journal-Gazette, and he kind of connected me with an opening here, and the rest I say is history.
Well, history, you do cover IPFW athletics for the paper. Mm-hmm. You are the beat writer in terms of minor league baseball at the Fort Wayne Wizards, mm-hmm. and you cover some high school athletics as well. Mm-hmm. Which of the three do you like to cover the most, just not to put you on the spot?
Wow, that's a good. I guess the Wizards. I'm a real big baseball fan, being from Cincinnati. You know, I grew up watching the Reds and everything like that, and I enjoy baseball, I think, the most. I mean, it's nice. You know, you go out to the ballpark during the summer and you know, get something to eat, watch a game. I mean, it really beats working for a living. But I enjoy all of it in different ways. You know, IPFW is kind of cool because I've really gotten to know some of the people there. I mean, the Wizards kind of roll over every year, so it's hard to get to know any of the players or the people. But IPFW is nice because, you know, I know a lot of the players and coaches, and high schools are nice because the area follows them so strongly and with such a spirit that it's nice as a reporter to cover them with that type of enthusiasm.
One of the reasons I wanted to have both you and Mike on is to talk about the relationship. You being a reporter, a newspaper reporter, you have to get information to help you do your job, and in this case that means you have to work with Mike. Mm-hmm. Talk about examples of working with Mike, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Wow.
Remember, Mike gets rebuttal time.
Yeah, it's a very interesting relationship because a lot of times there's stuff Mike knows that he can't tell me at a certain point. But it's also his job to be honest with me, and you know, if he can't tell me something, he's supposed to not tell me, you know, that he can't tell me. So it's my job of kind of working him around, and you know, he also has to work with me because it's his job to drum up interest in the community about IPFW and to get articles and stuff like that. So, you know, we both need each other. I mean, it's not like you know, one could work without the other. But yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes it works smoother than others. I mean, I would say that much.
Got a smile on your face, Michael. Your chance to rebut or to be nice to him.
Actually, it's real good working with Jay. We've got got a lot accomplished over the last couple of years, especially me doing official book for the Wizards. I mean, I get to do a little bit more of what do you want? What are you guys looking for? What do you need? And I think this year has been very beneficial for both parties because we've come up with different things. Of course, the story that he did on Keon Henderson about being a ordained minister. I mean, that was something that you wouldn't normally come up with if you hadn't talked and figured out what is that IPFW? What's out there? What's unique about our teams? So I think it's paid off. I think it's benefited both of us, and hopefully through another summer that we'll be able to start up some more and see what we come up with next year. You're not going to get sick of me. I might boot you out of the press box.
That's true.
Speaking of getting help, I've mentioned to you in the past, you did an article back in late November, early December. You had a chance to go with the men's basketball team to Michigan State. And personally, and I'm biased on this, I thought it was an excellent article. Talk about how that was set up, and if you can, obviously you worked with Mike, you worked with Doug Knoll, you were given access that not many people are given to do your story, you know, actually being with the team for a period of time. Talk about how the idea developed initially and came about, and then what help you got from Mike, and talk about how you put the story together.
Well, that idea rose out of, we were at, I believe it was the Cadillac Museum for one of the Cadillac Museum. Yeah, that's right.
Corvette.
Corvette Museum. The Corvette Museum for the opening kind of ceremonies and everything. And I was talking to Coach Knoll, and I mentioned, I'd like to do something big for that Michigan State game because, that was such kind of almost a historic occasion for this program. And I asked if I could maybe ride along with the team and stuff, and he was just blown away by the idea. He was very enthusiastic, thought it was a wonderful idea. He said, you can have access to everything. And it's one thing when a coach says that, and then another thing to see if it happens. But he was a man of his word. I mean, there was not a door closed to me the entire time. I mean, I was in the locker room before the game. Rode up the bus with the team, stayed in a hotel, the same corridor with them. And, I mean, it was, it was a great opportunity. It turned out to be a very good article. This type of thing, when you have a program that's transitioning to Division I, the more interesting part is not necessarily the results or the games or stuff like that, but more a group of people confronting a challenge that would overwhelm a lot of people. I mean, this is a team, this was a team of like Division II players, a couple Division I players, basically misfits from all over the place, and to see them have to run up against like a Michigan State and everything surrounded by that, the atmosphere, the situation, it was fascinating, and it made for a good article. I mean, those type articles are easy, when you've got all that material, it's just a question of, what gets in and what gets out. I mean, so that's not a hard article to do. It's usually pretty easy, but it worked out real well. Coach Knoll gave me a lot of help. Well, not a lot of help, but Coach Knoll gave me a lot of access, was very candid with me. And after, when I sat down to start writing the article, sometimes it was a matter of fact-checking, calling Mike, and then, I also worked with Coach Pachota and Coach Andrews, to fact-check, make sure I didn't mess anything up and make sure I got everything correct. And, it turned out real well. I mean, it was a nice way of covering a game from a different angle.
Are there any experiences that you can relate to now that you couldn't before, like maybe some discussions with the player? Or I do want to bring up one thing. There was a picture, one of the pictures that accompanied the article, and it showed Doug and Joe and Fred in the hotel room after the Michigan State game, because we lost 81-68, getting ready for Maine. And I know they kidded me because they told me that picture was taken around 1 in the morning, and they were out part at work until 4, or so they claim. And they said that after the picture, you bailed out of town. But is there an experience or something that you could relate that struck maybe a nerve or that you weren't expecting?
That particularly struck me because as much as I know from a logical standpoint how much work goes into them getting ready for each game, during the season, how quick it is. But until you have actually sat in the room or actually followed their schedule, it's hard to realize how much work goes in to each game. And they were up till 4. I mean, because they were very, very pumped after that game. They were pleased with the effort, and you could tell. And it was interesting to see them both, work ahead about Maine, but also, try and, also be very excited about Michigan State and talking about stuff that happened during the game and things like that. That was interesting. It was interesting to see, the players and how they interact and what their attitude is about certain things. Part of the reason why I left them is because I wanted to get upstairs and talk to some of the players about playing Michigan State. And it was funny because I wrote about it in the lead about when SportsCenter rolled on, and you could hear the kind of rummaging around, and then when it came on, Keon knocking on door to door, telling people, "Oh, did you see it?" And then they wanted to hear, what Izzo had to say about them in the post-game press conference. I had to get my recorder out and play that for them. There's about 10 of them, huddled around the wet bar in the hotel, in my room, and just kind of listening to Coach Izzo. It was interesting. There was all kinds of scenes and stuff. It was a very long article. It could have been double with all the stuff I had. There was a whole bunch of situations that struck me.
You saw the athletes from a different perspective than the public sees them. The public's perspective, here is an athlete. I'm not going to say student athlete like it's supposed to be, but here's an athlete who performs in a public arena, and they are supposed to be talented and skilled in certain areas. But that's on the basketball court. You had a chance to see them away from the court. Mm-hmm. Any one person, and I don't mean to maybe not mention a name, but was there anyone that struck you totally different from what you had visualized before?
Not really. It was interesting to see, as gifted and talented as most of these players, are. It was interesting to see how fragile some of their psyches are. When a lot of their game results depended on, very early in the game. If they hit a couple of shots, you could see them want the ball, see them want to shoot it, see them want to, do well. And then if they missed or something bad happened, you could see some of them get down. Things like that. That just kind of struck me. You'd think with all these kids, 19, 20 years old, the best athletic shape of their lives, that they would have nothing but that confidence, the entire time. But, I mean, some of them, really needed some success constantly to validate themselves in their mind, for them to believe that they're a Division I basketball player, So that kind of struck me. None of the players really struck me as any differently as it was the way they'd interacted with me before. They're all of the guys were nice, very solid human beings. Doug really looks for that, I think, when it comes to recruiting, so yeah, they're all good kids.
Final question before we take a break. From a reporting aspect, 14,759 fans, that was no misprint. They were all there.
Yeah.
Is that the biggest crowd that you've seen for an event that you have covered? Not counting maybe a Reds baseball game, which they drew, 30 or 40,000. But as far as from you personally, almost 15,000 people, biggest crowd you've covered an event at?
I did cover Reds game when Brian Reith pitched, when he was up briefly, the former Concordia pitcher. As far as a basketball game, I'm trying to think. I did cover Indiana one game, like the year before. But yeah, that's up there. It's certainly one of my favorite experiences. I've covered, the Olympic swim trials. I've covered a couple of national championship games. Volleyball and soccer, and that game at Michigan State was, one of my favorites. It was kind of just the atmosphere. The way they seat the media at the games is right in front of the Is Zone, which is the student section there. And I remember sitting there before the game, and they had this funniest thing in their newsletter. They put out a newsletter for each game, and they were talking about. They said the newsletter said apparently Indiana and Purdue have combined forces to try and snap our home game winning streak, which was up to like 40, 45 games at the time. So just little stuff like that, I get a big kick out of, and some of their comments were pretty funny too.
We're going to take a break. We're speaking with Jay Cohen from the Journal-Gazette and Sports Information Director Mike Jewell, and having a good time doing it. But we're going to take a brief time out and then return with more of Mastodon Spotlight right here on College 56 Sports.
Matthew Shepard died after he was beaten and tied to a fence. 2 men have been charged. One pleaded guilty.
My biggest regret after walking into the hospital and seeing him was I didn't tell him enough as a father that I loved him. The thing that I've learned most is that your son is your son and your daughter is your daughter, regardless of whether they're straight or gay.
Today's teenagers, the way people talk, you'd think they can't do anything right. It's just not so. We get to know over 300,000 kids a year. Smart kids who know what they want. They believe in themselves, and they believe in America. Some go straight to college. Others choose to learn leadership, discipline, courage, and commitment first with us. Today's military, making a stronger America, one good kid at a time.
Welcome back to Mastodon Spotlight. We're having a truly delightful time right now talking with Jay Cohen from the Journal-Gazette, and to Jay's left, Mike Jewell, Sports Information Director here at the university. And though Mike's been quiet for most of the last segment, he's going to get his chance to talk in this segment. And we'll start it off real nice, Mike. It's the end of the basketball season. The women's team finished last week, and we talked to Bruce Patterson about that earlier in the program. The men's team, as we tape this segment, are finishing their season tonight at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. It's been a long year in terms of the basketball season alone. It doesn't seem like October 15th was so long ago, and Midnight Madness, and here we are at the end of the basketball season. What's this been like for you? I know what it's been like because you and I talk a lot, but truthfully, to try to take at least a half a step back with the season nearly completed, what's it been like for you?
It's definitely been a different experience. Starting out the year, I was already planning ahead and hopefully be prepared for every game. For the most part, I was, but then once it started getting towards, I'd say, mid to December, end of December, all of a sudden, then the shocker really basically hit me because we were doing all these game notes. Well, once you start doing game notes over the holidays, it gets a little hard juggling family and your work. And what I was finding out was when we went out on the West Coast, that was probably the toughest part because the time frame from when we played one game to another, especially basically over a holiday being New Year's, was real tough because some of their media out there wanted game notes. And I mean, I got phone calls on New Year's Eve. And that totally blew me away because New Year's Eve I get a phone call from San Diego State, one of their guys out there, and you know who I'm talking about. And he calls me up at about 3 in the morning. Hey, Mike, are my game notes going to be in the morning? And I'm thinking, you know what? I just got done having fun, enjoying an evening with my wife, and I've got to get game notes to him by 10 a.m. So I actually did not go to bed that night. I stayed up and got game notes out to him. But I mean, it's one of those things that at Division I level, I understand why a lot of schools now have more than one SID, especially one that covers men's basketball, one that covers women's. It's very time consuming, and if you think about it, over the whole year, you basically have a game, it feels like every other night that you're playing a game. And especially us being independent, not in a conference, it's almost to that case where you have one game on a Monday, next game's Tuesday, then a Wednesday, then maybe a Saturday or something, then Monday again. So you're constantly on the move and wondering, will this season ever end or will you make it through the season? And as of tonight, I can finally say, hey, I made it through a season.
Just for the benefit, some of our viewers, and we've talked about this in prior shows when you've been on, a sports information director has to be a jack of all trades, master of all trades. You're always in contact with players, coaches, media, people like Jay, and especially from the opponent cities. But you have to do a lot of things. It's not just being in contact. You've got to record statistics, compile statistics. When you talk about writing game notes, it's obviously like a little bio sketch previewing the upcoming game. As you said, it's awfully time consuming, but how are you able to condense what you've got to do and get it done, truthfully?
Really, you can't condense it. I found out this year the way to do it was to start off with a nice shell and just keep the same shell for men's and women's. The only problem was to do a shell. It's not easy just to flip everything over right away and just get it right in there. I mean, you think cut and paste is easy, but after a while sitting at a computer for about 3 hours, your eyes just start watching numbers go all over the place. And I've had times where all of a sudden I just have to get up, walk away from the computer because I was starting to see numbers that weren't there. And that's normal when you sit there that long. But for the main part, it's been very different. Our game notes in the past have only been 5 pages. This year, they ended up being like 28, 29 pages because a lot of them want the breakdown of each player game by game, what they do. And then not only that, trying to get a hold of coaches and our coaching staff, especially when they're on the road all the time, to get just different things. What do they expect to do offensively? What are they going to do defensively? I mean, this weekend, I wasn't able to get them before they went to UMKC because they flew out Monday morning real early. So you can only get so much of your stuff done. Occasionally you'll miss parts, but then you fill it with other stuff that is interesting or key, or say like the one, how many animals have we beaten this year? I mean, that was something I thought was really, you think about it, team mascots, okay, well, let's throw this in here. How many or what was our attendance average? Because some of the games that we played in this year are the largest crowds we've ever played in for college basketball. Even though we played some D1 schools down the line, like Cleveland State, Kent State, when you go to a Michigan State and stuff like that and see how their operations ran, I mean, it's just amazing. And now you know why they have so many SIDs there trying to get this job done.
Be honest now. How many times has Jay bothered you and wanted something? And granted, you know that he's under pressure from his editor because he's got deadline. But has there ever been occasions when you'd like to say, or take the phone and crack it over his head and say, Jay, get out of here, forget it, you'll get it in due time?
Well, there's a couple times like that, or where you just want to reach through the phone and bring him through the other side and say, Jay, look, here, this is what I'm working on. But no, I mean, for the most part, Jay's been very good because a lot of the times he'll call right as I'm working on that same project, which makes it perfect because then all of a sudden I can just turn it over and give it to him. But a lot of the times, the one thing that I've noticed is we've got to keep in contact quite a bit, especially with the way the teams are playing every other day. He wants to know, hey, is there anything new going on? Could there be anything new? Have we lost a player to injury? I mean, you never know because your probable starters will start at the beginning at 1, and then all of a sudden next game you're wondering, okay, well, what happened to this player? Did he academically not make it? Did he break his leg, break his arm, get stitches in the back of his head? You never know. So they're going to want to know what happened to that player, or is it just because he's not playing good? Or is he still there? Who knows? I mean, you just never know. And some of the times, sometimes I don't even know, especially since they've been on the road so much. But it's pretty easy to find out. You just talk to a coach, hey, such and such still here, what's going on? Oh, he got injured, like D'Angelo Woodall cracked his head. I think it was out in it's either Oregon State or Colorado State.
Yeah,
ended up having
stitches or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, then you ask why he's not starting the next game. Well, 8 stitches sort of hurts, so you can understand why somebody doesn't start. But I mean, different things like that have occurred, and what you do is you just work around it. You try. In my seat that I'm in, I've got to do the best I can, and I got to get it to the quickest I can to them. Occasionally, you'll hear Jay say, well, I need this now. It's not his editor being pushy. You got to know, Jay. Sometimes Jay's just a little, he's got that little gouger. He's just sitting there poking you.
Well, I'm incredibly impatient as well. I mean,
that I knew from working with the Wizards with him. Hey, do I get a box score now? Well, Jay, you can wait till the printer actually goes through. But yeah, no, it's one of those things we just got to work together. And so far, I think we have worked together really well this year.
He's pretty patient with me too.
Like, you guys are still sitting in the same chairs. We haven't had a rumble yet.
Not yet.
I'll call sometimes and ask him stupid questions that if I spent 5 minutes to like think about it, I can find it easily. Either on the website or in the media guide or something like that. And I don't think you've ever told me, that's on the website or in the media guide. And he'll look it up for me, and, but Yeah, so he's usually pretty patient with me, which I know can be a chore.
It's not one of those where you just hear click.
No, it's not.
Is Mike still there?
I don't think you've ever hung up on me.
No, not yet.
I got to ask you before we run out of time. We're going to shift away from basketball briefly. We've only got a couple of minutes left. We're in men's volleyball season now. And I kidded you when you showed up here at the university. I said, stop in and say hi to Arnie. Arnie Ball, the head volleyball coach.
We miss you, Jay.
What's it like covering men's volleyball with Arnie Ball?
It's great. I'm a big fan of Arnie's. This is my third year, I think, covering volleyball, which is one of the longest things I've done here. It's one of the first things I did when I started here. And I enjoy it a lot. I mean, I like Arnie a lot. Arnie's a good guy, and he's incredibly nice. I mean, we get along really well. It's kind of a shame. I mean, sometimes over at the paper, that's one of the last things that we get to cover between, high schools and, college teams, et cetera, et cetera. But, I mean, yeah, it's nice. I mean, it struck me. I never knew that much about men's volleyball before I did, or the raw athleticism that it requires. Like, I mean, my first year it used to stun me how far Hector Soto used to jump, the former outside hitter here. And, I mean, Jeff Petak, there's a lot of very athletic guys in that system, and I wouldn't have really realized that, I think, unless I got to cover it. So, yeah, it's a good time. I enjoy it very much. They're going through some tough times this year, but I think they'll be pretty good next year.
We've got time for about one more question. And I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked your counterpart from the competing paper on a show we did several weeks ago. And I'll give you a fair chance to answer it exactly how you feel.
Okay.
IPFW made the move from Division II to Division I. Do you think it was a good move, and do you honestly feel that they can succeed at the D1 level?
Wow, that's a great question. Let me handle it
diplomatically.
Let me handle it in two parts. I think Walt Bowman, who was here before, and the Chancellor Wartell went by this principle that, basically if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. They said, we're going to try this. Will it succeed or not succeed? I don't know. I think, it's hard to argue with some things. I mean, the men's basketball team has 7 wins. They had 7 wins last year, which I find is an interesting number. I mean, they with all the stuff they've done this year, they still managed the same amount of wins that they did last year. And they're going to have more scholarships next year in the future, stuff, things like that. Now, as far as are they going to succeed or not, it depends on your definition of success. Are they ever going to become a MAC school? A MAC-type level school? I doubt it. Could they rise? Could they get in the mid-con and then rise to the top of the mid-con? Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely enough talent in this city, in this part of the state, that they could succeed in several different sports in the mid-con. I feel like they're doing the right things. I mean, building residence halls is going to be a big step for the athletic program in particular, because, when I was in school, people go to games, because they live on campus. It was a Tuesday night, what else are you going to do? I mean, let's walk over to, watch the basketball team play. That's going to be a huge step for them. Joining the league is crucial. They have to find a conference to join. And I think that it's a pretty good bet they will join the mid-con. Once that happens, that's huge to have something to play for, that Coach Knoll can go on the road and say, listen, we're going to play for an NCAA tournament bid. And that's the carrot that draws players here, that would draw players here. So, yeah, I think it'll work. I think it'll work down the line. I think Mark does a good job. I think they have the personnel in place that can do it. I mean, I just think the best they can hope for, I think, is to rise to the top of the mid-con. I mean, I don't think the resources, I don't think, are there to, be a mid-major type of school. So,
great answer. Wish we had time for more, but John's saying we're out of time. Don't want to do any editing if we have to avoid it, but thanks a lot for coming in. I appreciate it, and continued success covering not only IPFW athletics, but the Wizards and other endeavors at the paper. And Michael, as always, thank you. You helped Jay and me both out more than we can ever tell you. And
more than we ever would.
That's right. But thanks for coming on as well, and we will see you before the year's over, I know for a fact. So thanks again. We've had as our guest the second half of the program Mike Jewell, Sports Information Director here at IPFW, and Jay Cohen, reporter from the Journal-Gazette. We thank them, along with Bruce Patterson, for appearing on the program today. And as always, we thank you, the viewer, for tuning in to see what's going on with IPFW athletics. We invite you to come back next week when we hope to have Doug Knoll. We'll do a season wrap on men's basketball. And if things work out, we hope to have an interview with somebody from the Mid-Con, as well as the Mid-Con tournament takes place this weekend. Quick reminder, volleyball Friday night, 7 o'clock, New Jersey Tech. It's not on TV, so get out to the Gate Sports Center and see the Mastodons in action. That's it for this edition of Mastodon Spotlight. Until next week, this is Mike Moss saying have a great week and go Dons.